Percy Shaw, OBE don't you know, and he's the man credited with inventing the reflective road stud, more commonly known as the Catseye. But what if I told you he stole the idea? If you're a resident of Halifax, I can sense your anger already, but the history is questionable and there's evidence to suggest that he might have stolen the idea and not invented them at all.
You're a phony!
It's reported that in 1933, Percy Shaw was driving along in his hometown of Boothtown near Halifax, and he noticed his headlights reflecting off the tram lines that were built into the middle of the road, serving as a useful way to see the upcoming road and also where the lanes were divided. The tram lines were removed shortly after for maintenance, and whilst driving along the same section of road without these reflective tram lines, Shaw noticed his headlights reflecting in the eyes of a cat before running it over at 60 miles an hour. Okay, I might have made that last bit up, but the story about tram lines and all of that nonsense seems to vary depending on where you read it, and apparently this story was never actually confirmed by Shaw himself. There's some bullshittery afoot. Whatever the story, it led to Shaw being inspired to create a new road safety device, and soon after he would patent his design for a new Catseye in 1934. Remember that year, we'll need it later. The design consisted of a large cast iron frame which held two pairs of retroreflectors encased in a rubber housing. The rubber housing not only protected the glass reflectors from damage, it allowed for a simple cleaning process when inevitably a car would drive over it. The housing would recess into the Catseye under a vehicle's weight where they would pass through a rubber wiper or brush, thus cleaning the lenses. And the design encouraged rainwater to pool so it could also be used during the cleaning process. A clever piece of kit that would see installation all over the world, but it would seem the technology behind the Catseyes was invented by somebody else and Shaw, well, sort of stole it.
That's a nice
retro-reflector design,
says Burglar Bill. I'll have that.
Let's look at the main component, the Catseye or the retroreflector. These are essentially glass beads that reflect light back to its source, and sometimes they're referred to as cataphotes. In April 1926, Manchester-born Richard Murray would file a patent for the design of these retroreflectors. And this is quite some time before Shaw's application in what year, do you remember? 1934. The retroreflectors patented by Murray were mainly used in road signs and advertising billboards, but Shaw saw them as a solution to his road safety concerns, so lifted the technology for his own use. But let's be fair to Shaw for a moment. He took these retroreflectors, put them in pairs, put them in a cast iron housing. Surely he was the first person to come up with the Catseye. Wasn't he? Well, no. Not according to Nut Edwin Ericsson anyway, who in January 1926 filed a patent for his own road safety device that featured retroreflectors. But hang on a minute, forget Shaw for a moment. That's a fair few months before Murray would apply with his patent for a retroreflector design. So according to this, Ericsson was the first person to come up with a vital component in a Catseye, the retroreflector, meaning we can disregard everything we said about Murray earlier, so sorry to waste your time. So who the f*** is this Ericsson dude then? He was born in Norway in 1883 but emigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. In 1917 he got caught up in the war effort, something that was all the rage at the time, and it was during this period that he came up with the idea for a new road safety device, which led to his patent application in 1926, as we mentioned. Ericsson's design featured pairs of retroreflectors built into a cast iron housing. The only difference between this and Shaw's design was the lack of the rubber housing that protected and cleaned the glass. In September 1926, a revised design would be submitted by Ericsson that demonstrated how its angled front would protect the glass from vehicles. And perhaps this is why Ericsson didn't bother with a rubber housing, or maybe he just didn't think of it. In any case, it's quite clear to me that the first person to think about retroreflectors in a road safety device was Ericsson, not Murray, and certainly not Percy Shaw. OBE, don't forget. So why is Shaw credited with the invention of the Catseye and not Ericsson? A very good question. It might be because Shaw refined the design and introduced things like the rubber housing, but also by sheer luck he was pretty much the only person to ever turn Catseyes into a commercial success. But it might also be down to a technicality. When it came to those patent applications, Ericsson went in with a fairly broad approach, simply referring to his Catseyes as traffic signals. There was no mention of them being specifically used to mark out lanes on roads. The design that Ericsson applied makes it obvious that they could have been used in such a way, but it was Shaw who got the wording right in saying that they were for use in lane division. So as a result, Percy Shaw gets the OBE and all of the credit for inventing the Catseye, but did he really come up with the idea? No. But he did trademark the term Catseye, so that's definitely something he can take ownership over. Everyone else calls it a road stud. Thanks for watching.